It was just another busy day at the office, but for some reason, today felt a little different. The air in the building seemed thicker, like something was about to happen, but nobody could quite put their finger on it. People were hustling, going about their usual tasks, filling orders, answering phones, meeting deadlines. It was the kind of day that would pass unnoticed by most. Except for one thing, there was a new person in the office. The company, a family-owned business that had been around for years, was known for its strong reputation and dedicated staff. The employees were proud of where they worked, and the company had earned its place in the community as one of the most respected names in the industry. But as with any company, the changing of the guard was inevitable. Some staff members were new, while others had been there for decades. The new person had only just started, and like most new hires, they were trying to fit in, navigate the company culture, and get up to speed with their responsibilities. They were eager to prove themselves, to show everyone that they were capable and ready to contribute. And for this new hire, the pressure to perform was something they felt deeply. They had dreams, ambitions, and a burning desire to make a name for themselves in the workplace. It was their first real chance to prove their worth. On this particular day, the new employee was busy running errands for the team, helping customers with their needs, and organizing files. But amidst the chaos of the day, there was one thing that kept standing out. An elderly woman who had been coming into the office on and off for the past few days. She wasn't a regular, but she didn't seem like a stranger either. She would often sit quietly in the corner of the lobby, looking around with a calm, collected demeanor, her eyes sharp despite her age. To most people in the office, the woman was a bit of a mystery. She didn't seem to be in a rush, and she didn't wear a uniform like the staff. She would often sit in one of the armchairs, glancing through magazines or chatting with a few of the employees. There was something about her presence that was calming, almost regal, but no one knew much about her. They assumed she was a long-time customer, or maybe someone with a casual interest in the company, not realizing the significance of her visits. To the new employee, the elderly woman didn't seem particularly important at first. There was a lot to do, after all. The new hire had her own tasks, her own responsibilities, and she had set her sights on climbing the ladder as quickly as possible. She was focused on getting results, on standing out, and proving that she was a hard worker, ready to take on anything that came her way. But on this particular day, the elderly woman arrived again. She was dressed in a modest outfit, her hair neatly done, but she looked a little more frail than usual. She had a soft, gentle presence, but there was an underlying strength in the way she carried herself. The new hire noticed her entering the building and couldn't help but feel a little irritated. She had so much to do, and every little distraction felt like an obstacle. She couldn't afford to waste time helping people who weren't even paying customers. The elderly woman approached the desk, her steps slow but deliberate. She greeted the new hire with a polite smile and asked for assistance. "Excuse me, dear. Could you help me find a specific product? I've been looking for it for a while, and I'm hoping you have it in stock." The new hire, busy juggling a few things at once, barely glanced up. She had just finished a call with a customer, and there were a few other things on her mind. The last thing she needed was another distraction. Without much thought, she waved her hand dismissively and told the elderly woman that she could check the website or come back later. The tone she used wasn't rude, but it wasn't friendly either. It was sharp and a little impatient, the kind of tone someone might use when they were too busy to deal with something they didn't consider important. The elderly woman looked at her for a moment, her expression unreadable. She didn't seem offended, but there was something in her eyes, something that made the new hire pause for just a second. But that second quickly passed, and the new employee turned her attention to another customer who had been waiting. The elderly woman didn't argue or raise her voice. She simply nodded, smiled again, and turned to walk away. Her movements were slow, but there was a quiet dignity in the way she carried herself. She seemed unaffected by the brush-off, but the new hire couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this woman than met the eye. As the day went on, the new employee forgot about the encounter. There were reports to file, phone calls to make, and other tasks that needed her attention. She was focused on her work, moving through her to-do list, not giving much thought to the older woman who had walked in and out of the store. She had bigger things on her mind. She had a reputation to build, and she was determined to make her mark. But what the new hire didn't realize was that she had just crossed paths with someone who could change the entire trajectory of her career. She had brushed off the wrong person, and soon enough, that mistake would come back to haunt her. The woman she had ignored wasn't just another customer or a random passerby. She was a key figure in the company's history, someone who had shaped the business from the very beginning. Still, the new employee had no way of knowing this at the time. She had assumed that the elderly woman was just another person who didn't fit into her fast-paced world. Little did she know, she had just disrespected someone whose influence could have a lasting impact on her future in the company. In a place where respect and reputation were everything, the new hire was about to learn a lesson that would change her forever. And as the company's story continued to unfold, so would hers, though in ways she could never have predicted. A few days had passed since the brief encounter with the elderly woman, and life at the office had returned to its usual rhythm. The new employee had quickly fallen back into her routine, trying to make a strong impression. Every day was a chance to show what she was capable of, and she was determined not to let any distractions stand in her way. The office was always bustling, with people coming in and out, phones ringing, and customers constantly needing assistance. It was the kind of fast-paced environment that required focus and quick thinking. The new hire, still in the early days of her role, had a lot to prove, and she wasn't going to let anything slow her down. She found herself more and more immersed in the day-to-day grind. It was a demanding job, but she didn't mind. She wanted to rise up the ranks as quickly as possible, to earn the respect of her colleagues and bosses. She kept her head down, worked hard, and stayed focused on one goal: success. Yet even with all the work to do, there was something strange lingering in the back of her mind. She couldn't help but think about the elderly woman from the other day. It wasn't the encounter itself that stuck with her, but the feeling she had gotten from the woman. There was something about her calm demeanor, her quiet presence, that seemed to hold some kind of unspoken power. At the time, the new hire had brushed it off as nothing more than a fleeting thought. After all, there was no reason to dwell on something that didn't seem important, but the thought continued to nag at her, even as the days passed. She wasn't sure why, but it felt like she had missed something significant. The feeling of dismissing the woman, of not taking her seriously, seemed to weigh on her more than it should have. It was just a quick interaction, nothing more. Yet something told her that it might not have been as simple as she had thought. On the day of the incident, everything had felt rushed. The elderly woman had approached her quietly, asking for help. The new employee had been caught up in the frenzy of the day, trying to handle multiple tasks at once. There was a customer waiting for an answer to a question, another who needed assistance with a product, and several more things that needed her attention. It was a typical day, busy, chaotic, and fast-paced. So when the elderly woman had asked for help, the new hire had acted on impulse. She had been impatient, not wanting to be distracted from her work. The woman didn't seem like she was in a hurry, but the new employee didn't have time to slow down. She had told her to check the website, to come back later, anything that would get her out of the way so she could continue with her own tasks. It wasn't exactly rude, but it wasn't kind either. It was a quick dismissal, and she had thought little of it at the time. But now, as the days went on, the more she thought about it, the more it bothered her. What if the woman had been someone important? What if she had been more than just another customer? The new hire had assumed the woman was a casual visitor, someone who didn't matter much. But what if she was wrong? What if that woman had been someone whose presence commanded respect? Someone who could have been helpful in ways the new employee couldn't even imagine? The nagging feeling only grew stronger, and soon the new hire realized that she needed to find out more about the elderly woman. She wasn't one to ask around for information, but this time, her curiosity got the better of her. She casually brought up the woman to a colleague, trying to sound casual but feeling a little nervous inside. "Hey, do you know who that older woman is?" she asked, as if it were no big deal. Her colleague looked up at her, raising an eyebrow. "You don't know?" they asked, clearly surprised. "That's Mrs. Reynolds. She's a regular around here. She owns the company." The new employee blinked, confused. "She owns the company?" Her colleague nodded. "Yep, she's the chairwoman. The whole business is built on her vision. Without her, there wouldn't even be a company." The words hit the new hire like a punch to the gut. She felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her. The woman she had brushed off so easily, the one she had dismissed because she had been too busy to help, was not just anyone. She was the owner of the company. The realization stung, but it also left her with a deep sense of guilt. How could she have been so thoughtless? She felt a sudden rush of shame, her heart sinking as she replayed the interaction in her mind. She had acted like the woman was just another old lady wandering in for a random product. She had been dismissive and impatient, completely unaware of who she was speaking to. The more the new hire thought about it, the more she felt that she had made a huge mistake, one that could cost her more than just a simple apology. The days that followed felt heavy. She couldn't stop thinking about the incident. It was hard to focus on her work when her mind kept returning to that moment, to the way she had treated Mrs. Reynolds. Every time she saw the woman walk through the door, the guilt would rise up again, making her stomach twist. The new hire avoided eye contact with Mrs. Reynolds whenever she could, not wanting to confront the mistake she had made. But the elderly woman didn't seem to notice. She came and went quietly, always carrying herself with the same calm grace. She spoke to a few of the other employees now and then, but she never made a big scene. The new hire found it hard to believe that Mrs. Reynolds could be the owner of the entire company. She looked like any other senior customer who might visit, yet the weight of her presence was undeniable. There was something dignified about her, something that commanded respect without even trying. The more the new hire thought about it, the more she realized how wrong she had been. She had underestimated Mrs. Reynolds. She had judged her based on her appearance and age, assuming she didn't have the power or authority to make an impact. But now she knew the truth, and it made her feel smaller than ever. As the week went on, the new hire tried to push the thoughts of the incident to the back of her mind. She told herself that maybe it wasn't such a big deal, that Mrs. Reynolds had probably forgotten all about their brief exchange. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. She had made a poor impression, and it was something that couldn't be easily forgotten. And then, one afternoon, as she was sitting at her desk, her manager called her in for a meeting. The new hire felt a sudden rush of anxiety. She had no idea what the meeting was about, but her gut told her that something was off. Was this about the way she had treated Mrs. Reynolds? Was she about to face the consequences of her careless actions? She took a deep breath and walked into her manager's office, already feeling the weight of what was to come. Her manager was sitting behind his desk, looking at her with a serious expression. "Come in," he said, gesturing for her to sit down. "We need to talk." The new hire took a seat, her mind racing. She didn't know how much longer she could keep the guilt inside. She had to face the truth, and she had to be ready for whatever was about to happen next. The new hire sat nervously across from her manager, heart pounding in her chest. The words "we need to talk" echoed in her mind like a drumbeat. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the meeting wasn't going to be about anything good. She tried to calm herself, telling herself that maybe it was just a routine check-in or a discussion about her performance, but deep down, she knew it had to be about the incident with the elderly woman. Her manager looked at her carefully, his face serious, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy and the air in the room felt thick. Finally, he broke the quiet. "I wanted to talk to you about something that happened the other day," he said, his voice calm but firm. Her stomach dropped. She knew exactly where this was going. "It's come to my attention that you were a bit short with one of our regular visitors last week. A customer, actually," he continued, looking at her with an expression that seemed both concerned and slightly disappointed. The new hire's mind raced. Her heart skipped a beat. She felt the color drain from her face, her hands suddenly clammy. She couldn't remember exactly what had happened, but the guilt she felt now made the moment from a few days ago flash before her eyes. The encounter with the elderly woman, the dismissive way she had spoken to her. The realization hit her hard again. "I'm talking about Mrs. Reynolds," her manager said, and the words hit her like a punch in the stomach. "She's the one you spoke with. I know you didn't mean anything by it, but I wanted to bring it up. She's an important part of this company, and we have a culture of respect here that we take very seriously." The new hire sat frozen in place. The world around her seemed to blur for a moment as she tried to process the weight of what her manager had just said. Mrs. Reynolds, the Mrs. Reynolds, wasn't just another customer. She wasn't just an old lady walking into the store to browse. She was the very person who owned the company. She had built this business from the ground up, and here she was sitting in front of her manager's desk, having to hear about how poorly she had been treated by one of her employees. The new hire opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her mind was clouded with the sheer magnitude of her mistake. She had been rude, dismissive, and completely unaware of who she had been speaking to. In that moment, she realized that her ambition had clouded her judgment. She had been so focused on impressing everyone and proving herself that she hadn't taken the time to see the people around her for who they really were. She had failed to see the value in everyone, and now, the consequences of that mistake were crashing down on her. Her manager, noticing her silence, softened a little. "Look, I know you're new here, and I get that you're trying to find your way. But this company runs on respect. We value every person who walks through that door, whether they're a customer, an employee, or a visitor. Mrs. Reynolds has been a part of this company since it started, and her input goes far beyond just what we see on the surface. I just wanted to make sure you understand that." The new hire nodded, still unable to say much. She wanted to apologize right then and there, but the words felt stuck in her throat. How could she apologize for something so careless? How could she take back the disrespect she had shown someone who, at the time, she hadn't even realized was so important? Her manager gave a small, understanding nod. "I don't think it's something you intended to do, and I'm sure it wasn't your intention to upset her. But I think it's important that you understand the role Mrs. Reynolds plays here, and how vital it is to be mindful of how we treat others. I want you to take this as a learning experience." The new hire sat quietly, feeling the weight of her manager's words. She wanted to speak, to explain herself, to somehow make things right, but she knew that wasn't enough. There were no magic words to undo the damage she had done. All she could do now was learn from this moment. Her manager continued, "We're all human. We all make mistakes. The important thing is what you do after the mistake is made. It's about owning it, learning from it, and making sure it doesn't happen again." He paused and gave her a moment to reflect. "What I would suggest is that you take the time to apologize to Mrs. Reynolds. It doesn't have to be grand, but a simple, sincere apology goes a long way in showing respect. It's not just about her. It's about the culture we're trying to build here." The new hire finally found her voice. I didn't realize who she was. I feel awful about it," she said, her voice trembling. "I never meant to disrespect her. I just got caught up in everything, and I didn't think." Her manager nodded, understanding. "That's why I want you to take a step back. Slow down, and remember that it's not just about you and your goals. It's about the team, the company, and everyone who helps make it what it is. You can't achieve success without considering others along the way." As the conversation wound down, the new hire felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Relief because it wasn't the end of the world. Her manager had been understanding and gave her a chance to make it right. Anxiety because she still didn't know how she was going to face Mrs. Reynolds. Apologizing to a stranger was one thing, but apologizing to someone who owned the entire company? That felt like a different level of pressure, but she knew it was the right thing to do. Her manager gave her a final piece of advice. "Don't beat yourself up too much, but don't ignore it either. Go and make it right with Mrs. Reynolds. You'll feel better and she'll respect you more for it. Remember, the best leaders are the ones who can admit when they're wrong and take action to make it better." As the new hire walked back to her desk, her mind was spinning. She had a lot to think about, but the one thing that stood out above all else was her manager's words. The best leaders are the ones who can admit when they're wrong. She had made a mistake, yes, but now she had an opportunity to fix it, and maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment that defined who she would become in this company. It wasn't about how quickly she could rise to the top. It was about the kind of person she would be along the way. Taking a deep breath, she looked at the clock. Mrs. Reynolds would likely be in soon. The new hire knew what she had to do. She had to face her mistake, apologize, and show Mrs. Reynolds the respect she deserved. Not because of her position, but because of the person she was. She wasn't just a visitor. She was a pillar of the company, and that deserved acknowledgement. The new hire walked back to her desk with a mixture of dread and resolve. She knew she had to make things right with Mrs. Reynolds. The words her manager had said echoed in her mind. The best leaders are the ones who can admit when they're wrong. She wasn't sure what exactly was going to happen after she apologized, but she knew it was a necessary step. She had made a mistake, and now the only thing that mattered was fixing it. She couldn't stop thinking about the elderly woman and how dismissively she had acted the other day. The more she replayed that moment in her head, the more it became clear just how wrong she had been. She had been so focused on her own tasks, on proving herself, that she hadn't stopped to consider the people around her. Mrs. Reynolds wasn't just a customer, she was someone who had built this company. She deserved respect, just as much as any person in any position, but the new hire still felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. Apologizing to anyone wasn't easy, but apologizing to someone who owned the entire company, that felt like a whole different level of pressure. She couldn't help but feel that her words would never be enough to undo what had happened. What if Mrs. Reynolds didn't forgive her? What if the apology didn't mean anything to her at all? There were so many questions running through her mind, but the one thing she knew for certain was that she had to at least try. She sat down at her desk and took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She knew this moment was a turning point. It wasn't just about Mrs. Reynolds, it was about her as well. This was a test of her character, of her ability to own up to her mistakes and learn from them. She couldn't let her pride get in the way. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, and with every passing second, her anxiety only grew. She glanced toward the door, half expecting Mrs. Reynolds to walk in at any moment. The elderly woman had been coming by regularly, and there was a chance she could show up that day like she always did. The new hire wasn't sure if she was ready for that kind of confrontation, but she knew it was something she couldn't avoid. Just as she was starting to feel overwhelmed, she saw Mrs. Reynolds step through the door. She was as calm and composed as ever, moving slowly but with purpose. The new hire's heart raced. This was it. She had to face the woman she had wronged. She took a deep breath and stood up from her desk, trying to steady herself. Mrs. Reynolds glanced around the room, not immediately noticing the new hire standing at the counter. She was scanning the area, as if looking for something or perhaps someone. Her eyes met the new hire's, and for a split second everything seemed to freeze. The woman's gaze was steady, kind, but there was something else in her eyes too. Maybe it was the unspoken knowledge that they both knew what had happened the other day. The new hire took a few tentative steps forward, her mind racing. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The words she had rehearsed in her head felt like they were getting stuck. She had to get this right. "Excuse me, Mrs. Reynolds," she finally managed to say, her voice a little shaky but determined. I wanted to apologize for what happened the other day. I didn't realize who you were, and I treated you disrespectfully. I'm really sorry for that." Mrs. Reynolds looked at her, her expression softening. There was no anger or disappointment in her eyes, only an understanding that made the new hire feel both relieved and even more guilty at the same time. The elderly woman didn't speak right away, and the silence between them felt heavy. After what felt like an eternity, Mrs. Reynolds nodded slowly, as if considering the apology. "I appreciate you saying that," she said, her voice calm and kind. "It's not easy to admit when you've made a mistake, but you've done the right thing." The new hire felt a wave of relief wash over her. Mrs. Reynolds didn't seem angry or even upset. In fact, she seemed almost at peace with the whole situation. But there was a certain gravity in her words, an unspoken wisdom that the new hire couldn't ignore. "I'll be honest with you," Mrs. Reynolds continued, her eyes meeting hers directly. "It's not about the mistake you made. We all make mistakes. What matters is how we move forward from them. I've made plenty of mistakes in my life, too." She smiled softly, as if remembering something from long ago. "What I've learned is that growth comes from owning those mistakes and learning from them." The new hire's chest tightened with emotion. She had expected Mrs. Reynolds to be angry, to scold her for her disrespect. Instead, she was met with understanding, and a wisdom that made her feel as though she was being taught something much more important than just how to apologize. Mrs. Reynolds took a step closer, still calm but with a presence that made the new hire feel that she was truly in the presence of someone important. "You're new here, and I know it can be overwhelming. But remember, it's not just about doing a good job. It's about being a good person, too. That's what will take you further than anything else." The new hire swallowed hard, trying to keep her emotions in check. She had never expected this conversation to turn into something so profound. Mrs. Reynolds wasn't just teaching her about making amends. She was teaching her about integrity, respect, and the importance of character. "I'll keep that in mind," the new hire said, her voice quieter now but filled with sincerity. "I really appreciate you understanding." Mrs. Reynolds smiled, and it was a smile that reached her eyes, a smile that made the new hire feel as if she had just received some kind of unspoken blessing. "You'll do well here," she said kindly. "Just remember to stay true to who you are, and take every opportunity to learn from those around you. We all have something to teach each other, The new hire nodded, her mind buzzing with everything Mrs. Reynolds had said. She felt like she had been given a second chance, not just with Mrs. Reynolds but with herself. She realized that she had been so focused on moving ahead, on climbing the ladder, that she had forgotten what really mattered: respect, integrity, and the relationships she built along the way. As Mrs. Reynolds turned to leave, the new hire couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. She had come into the office that day expecting to face the consequences of her actions, to be reprimanded or scolded. Instead, she had been given a lesson in humility, and a reminder that true growth comes from acknowledging one's mistakes and making things right. As the door closed behind Mrs. Reynolds, the new hire took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. She had faced her mistake head-on, and in doing so she had gained something much more valuable than just Mrs. Reynolds's forgiveness. She had learned a lesson that would stay with her for the rest of her career, and probably the rest of her life. In the days that followed her conversation with Mrs. Reynolds, the new hire began to feel a shift inside herself. It wasn't just about the apology anymore. It wasn't even about the mistake she had made. What had started as a moment of embarrassment and regret had transformed into a turning point. The lesson Mrs. Reynolds had given her wasn't one that could be easily forgotten. It was a reminder of something simple but powerful, that growth often comes from moments of discomfort and self-reflection. Each day, she arrived at the office with a renewed sense of purpose. She had made it a point to slow down, to take a breath before reacting, and to focus not just on the tasks in front of her, but on the people around her. She had learned that no matter how busy things got, it was always worth taking a moment to recognize the value in others. Whether they were customers, coworkers, or even people she had initially underestimated, every interaction was an opportunity to learn and to grow. One morning, as she sat at her desk sorting through some emails, she heard a familiar voice behind her. It was her manager coming to check in on her. She turned around to face him, her heart still carrying a bit of the weight from that earlier conversation. But this time there was no anxiety. She had made peace with the past mistake and was focused on what lay ahead. "Hey, how's everything going?" he asked, a warm smile on his face. "It's going well, actually," she replied, returning the smile. There was something different about her tone now. Calm, confident, but humble. She had learned to focus less on impressing others and more on doing her job well and treating everyone around her with respect. "I noticed you've been handling things a lot more smoothly lately," her manager continued, clearly noticing the shift. "You're taking on more responsibility, and I can see that you're really starting to get the hang of things here." The new hire nodded, a small but genuine smile tugging at her lips. "Thanks, I think I'm just learning to be a bit more patient and intentional with how I handle things. It's been an adjustment, but I think I'm getting better at it." Her manager raised an eyebrow. "That's great to hear. I think you've come a long way in a short amount of time. But there's one thing I wanted to talk to you about." "Something important?" Her stomach flipped, but not out of fear. It was more like a sense of curiosity. What else could she possibly be learning? "Mrs. Reynolds asked me to let you know she was impressed with your attitude after your conversation. She said she saw a lot of growth in you and she's looking forward to seeing how you develop further with the company." The new hire's heart skipped a beat. Mrs. Reynolds had noticed. She had expected Mrs. Reynolds to move on quickly, perhaps even forget about the awkward encounter. But the fact that Mrs. Reynolds had taken the time to acknowledge her improvement meant more than anything. It was a quiet endorsement from someone who had built the company, someone whose opinion mattered more than any immediate recognition from a manager. I'm really glad to hear that," the new hire said, her voice a little softer now. "I didn't expect that at all." Her manager smiled knowingly. "Sometimes the best things happen when we don't expect them. It shows that you're truly growing, not just in skill but in the way you see the bigger picture. And that's something we value here. It's not just about what you can do, it's about who you are." The words were simple, but they landed deeply. The new hire had been so focused on proving herself professionally that she had neglected the importance of her own character. In that moment, she realized that true growth wasn't just about the tasks you could accomplish. It was about the kind of person you became along the way. As the weeks went on, the new hire found herself becoming more connected to the work she was doing and the people she was working with. She had built stronger relationships with her coworkers, many of whom she had previously viewed as obstacles to her success. She had learned to see the value in everyone, Regardless of their position or title, she was no longer in a rush to climb the ladder or impress anyone. Instead, she focused on doing her best work, being kind and building trust with those around her. The office felt different to her now. It wasn't just a place to clock in and out. It was a community, and she was a part of it. She found herself looking forward to the small moments, the simple interactions, whether it was helping a colleague with a task, having a brief chat with a customer, or simply listening to someone's story. Each moment held value, and she realized that this was the true reward of her work: relationships, respect, and a sense of purpose. One afternoon, a few months after the incident, the new hire was walking through the office when she saw Mrs. Reynolds again. The elderly woman was standing near the front desk, chatting with a few employees. She was as graceful as ever, her presence calm and steady. The new hire paused for a moment, watching from afar. She still remembered the nerves she had felt when she first apologized to her, the sense of dread that had filled her chest. But now all she felt was a sense of gratitude. As Mrs. Reynolds noticed her from across the room, their eyes met. The elderly woman gave her a small, knowing smile, one that spoke volumes without saying a word. It wasn't just a smile of acknowledgement. It was a smile of recognition. Mrs. Reynolds saw the change in her. She had grown, and that was something worth celebrating. The new hire walked over to her, feeling at ease this time, without the weight of guilt hanging over her. "Hello, Mrs. Reynolds," she said, her voice warm but confident. "Good afternoon," Mrs. Reynolds replied with that same gentle smile. "I've been hearing a lot of good things about you. Keep up the great work." The new hire smiled back, feeling a sense of pride she hadn't experienced before. "Thank you," she said simply. And for the first time, she realized that her journey wasn't about impressing anyone, least of all Mrs. Reynolds. It was about showing up every day with integrity, learning from her mistakes, and being the best version of herself, both inside and outside the workplace. As the conversation ended, the new hire walked back to her desk a little lighter than before. She had come so far since that first encounter with Mrs. Reynolds, and she knew that the lessons she had learned would stay with her for years to come. It wasn't about the mistakes she had made. It was about what she had done after. And now she could say with confidence that she was on the path to becoming the kind of person who could navigate the challenges of life with grace, humility, and respect for others. As the day drew to a close, she reflected on everything that had brought her to this point: the embarrassment, the growth, the lessons, and the people who had helped shape her. She realized that it wasn't just one mistake that had changed her. It was the way she had chosen to move forward. And that, she knew, would make all the difference in her future.